The elevator descended for 17 minutes before reaching the bottom. Admiral Patricia Cole stood in silence, watching the depth counter climb higher and higher. 3,000 meters. 4,000. 5,000. The facility had been built during the early days of human expansion, when the first generation of explorers had encountered species that made them realize the universe was not always friendly. Dr. Nathan Price waited for her at the blast doors. He was a thin man with tired eyes and hands that trembled slightly. He had spent 30 years working on weapons he hoped would never be used. Every night, he had gone to sleep praying that humanity would never need what he had created. "Admiral," he said quietly, "I wish we were meeting under different circumstances." "So do I," Patricia replied. "Show me everything." The blast doors opened onto a cavern that stretched for kilometers in every direction. Row after row of sealed containers lined the walls, each one marked with warning symbols in a dozen languages. Automated systems hummed in the darkness, maintaining weapons that had been waiting in silence for decades. Nathan walked her through the facility, his voice flat and professional. He explained each weapon system the way a doctor might explain a terminal diagnosis. These were not tools of war. These were instruments of extinction. "Quantum disruption warheads," he said, gesturing to the first section. "They don't destroy matter. They unmake it. Everything within the blast radius simply ceases to exist at the atomic level. No debris, no radiation. Just nothing." Patricia nodded slowly. "How many do we have?" 12,000. Each one can eliminate a medium-sized moon." They moved deeper into the facility. Nathan showed her neural cascade bombs designed to turn a species' own nervous system against itself. He showed her plague vectors engineered to target specific genetic markers. He showed her autonomous hunter-killer drones numbered in the millions, each one capable of independent operation for years. "We built these because we were afraid," Nathan admitted. "The first explorers encountered the Velkari and saw what they did to weaker species. They came home and told the government that we needed insurance, something that would make any species think twice before attacking us. But we never used them," Patricia said. "We never had to. The mere possibility that we might have such weapons was enough to deter most threats. And we genuinely hoped we would never face a situation where—" He trailed off, unable to finish. Patricia thought about her grandchildren. She thought about the playgrounds of New Eden and the children who would never grow up. She thought about all the years humanity had spent trying to be good and kind and peaceful. "Activate everything," she said. "Begin full production immediately." Nathan closed his eyes for a moment. "Admiral, once we do this, there's no going back. The galaxy will see what we're capable of. They'll never look at us the same way again." "Good," Patricia replied. "I want them to be afraid. I want every species in this galaxy to understand exactly what happens when you murder our children." Across human space, something remarkable was happening. The news of New Eden had spread to every colony, every station, every ship. And instead of despair, humanity responded with cold, unified fury. Recruitment centers were overwhelmed within hours. Men and women who had never considered military service lined up by the thousands, demanding to be trained. Scientists abandoned peaceful research to offer their skills to the war effort. Factory owners contacted the government, asking what they could produce. Artists created propaganda. Writers penned speeches. Musicians composed anthems of rage and defiance. Captain Greg Palmer had retired from the fleet 5 years earlier, tired of the endless patrols and diplomatic missions that seemed to accomplish nothing. He had bought a small farm on a quiet colony and tried to forget about the stars. When he heard about New Eden, he was back in uniform within 6 hours. The fleet gave him command of the Nightfall, a ship that had been sitting in a classified shipyard for 15 years. On paper, it did not exist. In reality, it was the most advanced warship humanity had ever built. It had been designed for one purpose only: to make enemies of humanity regret their decisions. Greg gathered his crew in the main hangar before their first mission. They were young, most of them, their faces hard with grief and determination. Many had lost family on New Eden. All of them had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment the fleet could offer. "The Valkyrie have studied us for decades," Greg told them. "They've analyzed our broadcasts and our diplomatic communications. They think they understand what humanity is. They think we're soft because we chose to be kind. They think we're weak because we preferred negotiation to violence." He walked among them, meeting their eyes one by one. They made a mistake that many species have made throughout history. They confused our restraint for inability. They saw us turn the other cheek and assumed we had no fists. Greg smiled, and there was nothing warm in it. "We're going to correct their misunderstanding. We're going to show them what humanity is capable of when we stop being nice. And when we're done, no species in this galaxy will ever again think that attacking our people is a good idea." The crew cheered, a sound that echoed through the hangar like thunder in the Galactic Assembly. Representatives of other species watched humanity's mobilization with growing unease. Many had secretly hoped the Valkyrie would humble the ambitious young race. Humans expanded too quickly, talked too loudly about cooperation and equality. They made older species uncomfortable with their optimism. Now those same species watched in horror as humanity revealed capabilities no one had suspected. The peaceful explorers were building weapons of unimaginable power. The smiling diplomats were becoming cold-eyed warriors. The species that had signed every peace accord and limited its own military was transforming into something terrifying. Ambassador Linda Shaw addressed the assembly one final time before departing for Valkyrie space. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, the sort of person who had spent her life believing in the power of words. "We tried," she said simply. "For 80 years, we tried to show the galaxy that violence was not the answer. We believed that if we were patient and kind and reasonable, eventually everyone would see the wisdom of peace." She gathered her notes, her movements slow and deliberate. "We were naive. The Valkyrie taught us that some species only understand one language. So now we're going to speak to them in terms they can comprehend." Linda paused at the door, looking back at the assembled representatives. "I suggest the rest of you take notes. This lesson is for everyone." The awakening had begun. Humanity was no longer sleeping, and the galaxy was about to discover what that meant. The quantum disruption field expanded outward from the nightfall in a sphere of absolute destruction. It moved faster than light, faster than thought, faster than the Valkyrie commanders could process what they were seeing. 200 warships caught in the initial blast simply ceased to exist. They did not explode. They did not burn. They were unmade at the atomic level, every particle scattered into quantum foam. One moment, 200 ships filled with thousands of Valkyrie warriors hung in space. Their weapons pointed at the lone human vessel. The next moment, there was nothing but empty darkness. The remaining 600 ships broke formation, their commanders screaming orders that nobody could follow. They had trained for every kind of battle imaginable. They had developed tactics for fighting enemies with superior numbers, superior technology, superior strategy. Nothing in their training had prepared them for weapons that simply erased matter from existence. Captain Greg Palmer watched the chaos on his tactical display. His face showed no satisfaction, no triumph, only grim determination. "Target their command ships," he ordered. "Leave their homeworld alone. We want witnesses." The nightfall moved through the Valkyrie fleet like death itself, its weapons reaching out to touch ship after ship. The quantum disruption bursts were smaller now, Precise surgical strikes that eliminated specific targets while leaving others untouched. Within 30 minutes, the greatest fleet the Valkyrie had ever assembled was reduced to scattered, survivors fleeing in every direction. On the Valkyrie homeworld, billions watched the battle in stunned silence. They had gathered in public squares and private homes, expecting to witness the destruction of the human invader. Instead, they watched their invincible navy dissolve like morning mist. The Supreme Matriarch stood in her war room, surrounded by advisors who had no advice to give. Her compound eyes reflected the tactical displays, showing the systematic dismantling of everything her species had built. "How is this possible?" she whispered. They were supposed to be weak. They signed peace accords. They limited their military. They talked about cooperation and friendship. "They lied," one of her advisors said, his voice hollow with shock. No, the matriarch's voice was barely audible. They didn't lie. They genuinely wanted peace. They genuinely believed in cooperation. They simply also prepared for the possibility that others did not share their beliefs. Across Valkyrie space, the hidden hunter-killer drones activated simultaneously. They had been waiting in silence for weeks, embedded in asteroid fields and orbital debris and the dark spaces where no one thought to look. Now they emerged in swarms, millions upon millions of autonomous weapons executing their programming with perfect efficiency. Military installations that had taken centuries to build vanished in moments. Shipyards that produced the vessels of conquest became clouds of scattered atoms. Communication networks collapsed. Command structures disintegrated. The infrastructure of an interstellar empire, built over thousands of years, began to crumble in hours. Admiral Patricia Cole watched the destruction from the constellation, her flagship hanging at the edge of Valkyrie space. Lieutenant Commander Amy Hart stood beside her, the same officer who had walked through the ruins of New Eden and picked up a burned teddy bear. "They're requesting a ceasefire," Amy reported, her voice carefully neutral. "The Supreme Matriarch is willing to discuss terms of surrender." Patricia shook her head slowly. "They had their chance for surrender. We gave them 72 hours. They chose to mock us instead." "Admiral," Amy hesitated. "This isn't who we are. We don't do this. We don't slaughter our enemies after they ask for peace." "You're right." Patricia turned to face her young officer. "This isn't who we are. This isn't who we want to be. But the Valkyrie didn't attack us because we did something wrong. They attacked us because they thought they could. Because they looked at humanity and saw prey." She gestured at the tactical displays showing the systematic destruction of Valkyrie military assets. "Every species in this galaxy is watching right now. They watched New Eden burn and they took notes. Some of them were hoping the Valkyrie would succeed. Some of them were already making plans to do the same thing to our other colonies." Patricia's voice hardened. "We're not just fighting the Valkyrie. We're teaching the galaxy a lesson. We're showing every species that watched our children die exactly what the cost of attacking humanity will be. Not defeat. Not occupation. Absolute annihilation of everything that makes war possible." "And what about their civilians?" Amy asked. "What about the billions of Valkyrie who had nothing to do with New Eden? We're not touching them." Patricia pulled up a detailed map showing the pattern of attacks. "Look. Every strike is targeting military infrastructure. Shipyards, weapons factories, command centers, military bases. We're destroying their ability to make war, not their ability to live." She met Amy's eyes. "The Valkyrie would have exterminated us down to the last child. They said so themselves. We're choosing to be better than that. But we're also choosing to make sure they can never threaten us again." The destruction continued for 3 days. The Nightfall and its sister ships moved through Valkyrie space like surgeons removing a cancer, precise and methodical. They destroyed everything that could be used for war and left everything else untouched. When it was over, the Valkyrie Dominion still existed. Their homeworld was intact. Their civilian population was largely unharmed. Their cities still stood. Their farms still produced food. Their hospitals still treated the sick. But their military was gone. Their ability to project power beyond their own system was erased. The empire that had conquered 11 species and terrorized the galaxy for millennia was reduced to a single world, dependent on the mercy of neighbors they had once dominated. Captain Palmer broadcast a final message before the human fleet withdrew. The Valkyrie Dominion is hereby dissolved. Your former subject species are now free. Any attempt to rebuild military capabilities will be met with immediate response. Any attempt to harm humans anywhere in the galaxy will result in consequences that make today look gentle. He paused, and when he continued, his voice was softer. We didn't want this. We never wanted this. But you gave us no choice. You killed our families and expected us to accept it. You thought our kindness meant we were incapable of cruelty. Greg Palmer looked at the image of the Valkyrie homeworld on his display. Now you know better. We hope you learn from this. We hope you find a way to live peacefully with your neighbors. Because the next time will be worse. The nightfall vanished into fold space, leaving behind a shattered empire and a galaxy that would never see humanity the same way again. The attack began on a Tuesday. There was nothing special about that morning. The sun rose over the Pacific Ocean and spread light across the Earth like it had done for billions of years. Council mining operations started their daily shifts. Transport ships lifted off with their human cargo. Everything seemed normal. Then the sky opened up. Captain Denise Murray stood on the bridge of the Defiance as it broke through the ocean surface off the coast of Hawaii. Water cascaded off the ship's hull as it rose into the air, its engines glowing blue against the morning light. Around her, 300 crew members worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. All systems green, reported Lieutenant Kevin Park from the tactical station. Shields at full power. Weapons charged and ready. Denise looked at her crew. Most of them were young. Many had never seen combat before today. But they had trained for this moment for 2 years, and they were ready. Send the signal, she said. Across the planet, the same scene repeated itself over and over. Ships rose from the ocean near Japan. Ships burst from mountain hideouts in the Rockies, the Alps, and the Himalayas. Ships emerged from beneath the frozen ice of Antarctica and the scorching sands of the Sahara Desert. 412 human vessels entered the skies of Earth within 60 seconds of each other. At the same moment, resistance teams on the ground struck every major council installation. Carlos Mendez led his unit into the command center outside Chicago. They moved fast and quiet, taking out Krethoner guards before they could raise an alarm. Breach in 3, 2, 1. Tony Reyes counted down, then blew the door with a shaped charge inside. Council officers scrambled for weapons. They never had a chance. The humans had studied their movements, their reaction times, their weaknesses. Every shot found its target. In less than 2 minutes, the command center was secure. Carlos walked to the main console and opened a communication channel. This is Mendez. Chicago Command is ours. All council forces in the region are cut off from headquarters. Similar reports came in from around the world: London, Tokyo, Sydney, Moscow, New Delhi. The council's communication network collapsed like a house of cards as human forces seized one node after another in orbit. The Valori patrol fleet finally responded to the chaos below. 12 ships broke formation and moved to intercept the rising human vessels. Commander Velcro, captain of the lead ship Crystal and Dawn, sent a message to all frequencies. Human vessels, power down your engines and surrender immediately. You cannot hope to match Council technology. Any resistance will result in your destruction. On the bridge of the Defiance, Denise listened to the message and smiled. Kevin, target the lead ship. Fire when ready. With pleasure, Captain. The Defiance's main cannon charged and fired. The beam was different from anything the Council had seen before. It shifted through frequencies faster than their sensors could track, finding the gap in the crystalline. Dawn shields like water flowing through a crack. The shot hit the Valry ship dead center. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the crystalline dawn exploded in a ball of white light. The other Council ships froze. In 300 years of galactic dominance, no single shot from a primitive species had ever penetrated Council shields. It was simply not possible. And yet, the debris of the crystalline dawn was spreading across the sky. All ships, open fire, Denise ordered. The human fleet unleashed everything it had. Each ship carried weapons equipped with Grace Kim's frequency adaptation technology. Each shot found its target. Within minutes, 7 more Council vessels were destroyed. The remaining 4 turned and ran, but they were too slow. None of them escaped. On the surface, Vartex watched the battle from a mobile command post. His subordinates were screaming at him for orders, but he could not speak. He could only stare at the display showing Council ships dying one after another. How? He whispered. How is this possible? A human voice crackled over the communication system. It was Carlos Mendez, broadcasting on all frequencies. Attention all Council forces. Earth is no longer under occupation. You have 10 minutes to surrender. Any vessel that attempts to flee will be destroyed. Any ground force that resists will be eliminated. The choice is yours. Vertex looked at his remaining forces. They outnumbered the human ground troops by at least 3 to 1. They had better weapons, better armor, better training. By every measure, they should win any battle. But the sky was falling. And for the first time in his long career, Vertex understood what it felt like to be the conquered rather than the conqueror. Stand down, he ordered quietly. His subordinates stared at him. Commander? I said stand down. All forces, lay down your weapons. We surrender. The liberation of Earth took 6 hours. By noon, every Council installation on the planet was in human hands. The few Council ships that had tried to flee had been shot down by human vessels that moved faster and hit harder than anyone had thought possible. Over 4,000 Council soldiers had surrendered. The rest were dead. Danny Liu walked through the streets of Geneva, where it had all begun. The city was celebrating. People were dancing, crying, hugging strangers. Flags of every nation flew from every window. For the first time in 18 months, humanity was free. Maria Santos found him standing in front of the building where she had signed the integration agreement. She looked 10 years older than she had before the invasion, but there was light in her eyes that he had not seen in a long time. We did it, she said softly. Danny nodded. The first part. But this isn't over. The Council will send more ships. A lot more ships, I know. Maria looked up at the sky, where human vessels patrolled in formation. But we've proven something today. We've proven that we can fight back. And that changes everything. That night, Danny received a message from Grace Kim. She had been monitoring Council communications and had intercepted a transmission from their main fleet. They're calling it the Grand Fleet, Grace reported. 3,000 warships. They're assembling now. How long until they reach Earth? 3 months. Maybe 4. Danny looked at the numbers. 400 human ships against 3,000 Council vessels. Even with their new technology, it would be the hardest fight humanity had ever faced. But they had done the impossible once. They could do it again. Tell everyone to rest while they can, Danny said. And then get back to work. We're going to need more ships. A lot more ships, Across the planet, humans celebrated their freedom. They did not know that an even greater battle was coming. They did not know that the Council was already planning its revenge. But they knew one thing for certain. They would never surrender again. Whatever came next, humanity would face it together. And they would fight until the last ship, the last soldier, the last breath, because that was what humans did. They survived. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. 3 months had passed since the destruction of the Grand Fleet. In that time, everything had changed. Human ships had been spotted in Council space, but they did not attack major worlds. Instead, they appeared near slave labor camps and mining colonies. They destroyed the Council guards, armed the prisoners, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. On 17 different worlds, uprisings had begun. Species that had been conquered for centuries saw what the humans had done and found their courage again. The Council was putting out fires everywhere, but for every rebellion they crushed, 2 more appeared. High Arbiter Zelithra had been removed from power. Her son's failure at Sol and her own arrogance had cost the Council too much. A moderate coalition led by Ambassador Tith now controlled the government, and they faced an impossible question. What do you do with a species that should not exist? The human delegation arrived at Vala Prime aboard the Defiance. It was a small group: Secretary General Maria Santos, Admiral Danny Liu, and Grace Kim. They were escorted by 100 human soldiers who marched through the Council capital with their heads held high. The citizens of Vala Prime watched from their windows. They had never seen anything like this. Conquered species did not walk freely through their streets. Conquered species did not look at them with calm, steady eyes. The Council chamber was full when the humans entered. Representatives from all 12 species sat in their designated sections, some hostile, some fearful, and some curious. Tith waited at the central podium, his aquatic body shimmering in the artificial light. "You requested this meeting," Tith said. His voice was calm but careful. "We are prepared to discuss terms." Maria walked to the speaker's platform. She was dressed simply, in the same clothes she had worn to every diplomatic meeting since the invasion began. She did not look like a conqueror. She looked like what she was: a tired woman who had fought too hard for too long. "We are not here for terms," Maria said. Her voice carried through the chamber, amplified by speakers that translated her words into a dozen different languages. "We are here to deliver a message." She activated a holographic display. Earth appeared, floating in the center of the chamber. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. A beautiful world that had almost been destroyed. 20 months ago, you came to our planet and told us we had no choice. You said we would be subjugated, our resources harvested, our people enslaved. You believed this because you had done it to countless others, and no one had ever stopped you. She paused and looked around the chamber. Some representatives refused to meet her eyes. Others stared at her with open hatred. A few, including Tith, watched with something that looked almost like respect. "We stopped you, not because we are stronger or more advanced. Your technology was superior to ours. Your numbers were greater. By every measure, you should have won. But you made a mistake that every tyrant in human history has made. You assumed that because we smiled and nodded, we had accepted our fate. You forgot to consider that we might be waiting." Danny stepped forward and stood beside Maria. He had spent his entire military career preparing for battles he thought would never come. Now he had fought in 2 of the most important battles in human history, and he had won them both. "Earth will not seek revenge," Maria continued. "We will not conquer your worlds as you attempted to conquer ours. We are not like you. We do not believe that strength gives us the right to enslave others." A murmur ran through the chamber. This was not what they had expected. Conquered species either submitted completely or fought until they were destroyed. They did not win and then offer mercy. But understand this, Maria said, and her voice grew harder. We are watching. Every species you have subjugated, every world you have stripped bare, every atrocity committed in the name of galactic order. We know about all of it, and we are prepared to ensure it never happens again. Grace walked forward carrying a small data chip. She placed it on the podium where every representative could see it. This contains the specifications for our adaptive shield technology, Grace explained. We are offering it freely to any species currently under Council occupation. Any world that wants to defend itself against Council aggression will have the tools to do so. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted over each other in a dozen different languages. Some demanded that the humans be arrested. Others called for immediate war. A few sat in stunned silence, trying to understand what was happening. Tith raised his appendages for silence. It took several minutes, but eventually the chamber quieted. What do you want from us? He asked. Maria's expression softened slightly. We want what every species wants. To live in peace. To explore the stars. To build something that lasts. We could have destroyed your fleet entirely. We could be conquering Council worlds right now. Instead, we are standing here, offering you a choice that you never offered us. She turned to leave, then paused at the chamber door. You called us primitives. Perhaps you were right. We are young, and we have much to learn about the galaxy. But we have learned one thing very well over our short history: how to fight for our survival. Remember that the next time you consider whether a species is worth conquering. The human delegation departed 1 hour later. The Defiance lifted off from Valor Prime and jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed in the weeks that followed. The Council voted to end the practice of forced integration. Species that wanted to join could do so as equals. Species that wanted to remain independent would be left alone. It was not perfect justice, but it was a beginning. The shield technology spread faster than anyone expected. Within a year, dozens of worlds had built their own defense systems. The era of easy conquest was truly over. On Earth, life slowly returned to normal. The mines were closed. The labor camps were converted into memorials. Children went back to school and learned about the invasion in history classes. Most of them could not understand how the world had ever been any different. Danny Liu retired from the military and wrote a book about his experiences. It became the most popular book in human history, translated into every language on Earth and eventually into dozens of alien languages as well. Grace Kim received the highest honors humanity could offer, but she avoided the spotlight. She went back to work, designing new technologies that would help humanity explore the stars as friends rather than conquerors. Carlos Mendez returned to his hometown in Texas and opened a small restaurant. He never talked about the war unless someone asked, and even then, he kept most of the details to himself. Some things were too important to become stories. Maria Santos served 2 more terms as Secretary General before retiring to a quiet life in her native Spain. She spent her final years tending a garden and playing with her grandchildren. 1 year after the liberation, a monument was built in Geneva on the spot where Maria had signed the integration agreement. It was a simple stone pillar with a single phrase carved into its surface. We survived. That was all it needed to say. Humanity had faced its greatest test and had not been found wanting. They had shown the galaxy what a free species could accomplish when it refused to give up. And in the great halls of power across 100 worlds, the story of Earth was told and retold. It became a legend, then a myth, then something close to a religion. The small blue planet that had said no. The primitive species that had broken an empire. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was never the same. Its power rested on fear, and the humans had proven that fear could be overcome. Every time a council representative considered conquest, they remembered what had happened at Seoul. They remembered the ships rising from the ocean. They remembered the Grand Fleet burning in the asteroid belt. They remembered the silence that had fallen over the council chamber when a tired woman in simple clothes had told them that their time was over. Some empires fall with fire and blood. Others fall with a whisper. The Galactic Council fell with silence, and in that silence, humanity found its voice. The Valkyrie dropships came down like metal rain. Commander Varak watched from the command ship as his soldiers landed on the plains outside the human settlement. 2,000 warriors, each one trained since birth for combat. Each one wearing armor that could stop most weapons. Each one carrying plasma rifles that could burn through stone. This would be easy, Varak thought. The humans were primitive. They had only been traveling through space for a few hundred years. The Valkyrie had been conquering worlds for 10,000 years. There was no contest here. "Sir, the landing is complete," said Sub-Commander Thilik. He was younger than Vorak, eager to prove himself. "Shall we begin the assault?" Vorak looked at the human city through his viewing screen. It was small by Valkyrie standards. Simple buildings made of metal and concrete. A few tall structures in the center. Roads spreading out like the branches of a tree. Something was wrong. "Where are the defenders?" Vorak asked. Thilik checked his instruments. "I see no military positions. No defensive walls. No weapon emplacements." "The city appears empty, Commander," another officer added. "Thermal scans show very few life signs." Vorak's antennae twitched. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen a species simply abandon their home without a fight. Even the weakest races tried to defend themselves. "They ran away," Thilik said with disgust. "Cowards." They knew they could not win, so they fled. "Perhaps," Vorak said slowly. But he did not believe it. Something felt wrong. "Move forward. Search every building. Find where they went." The Valkyrie soldiers marched into the city in perfect formation. Their boots made heavy sounds on the empty streets. Their weapons were ready, but there was nothing to shoot. The buildings were dark and silent. Vehicles sat abandoned in the roads. Food was still on tables in the restaurants, as if everyone had simply vanished in the middle of their meals. Private Kevin Burke watched them from beneath a drainage grate. He was 22 years old and had never fired a weapon at a living creature before yesterday. His hands were shaking, but he forced himself to stay still. Sergeant Lisa Marsh had told him to wait for the signal. She had been very clear about that. "Do not move until you hear the explosion," she had said. "Then you shoot and you run. Do not try to be a hero. Hit them and disappear. That is how we survive this." Kevin had grown up on a farm outside the city. He knew how to hunt deer and wild pigs. His father had taught him to track animals through the forest, to move without making sound, to wait for hours for the perfect shot. This was the same thing, he told himself. Just bigger prey. The Valkyrie soldiers passed over his hiding spot without seeing him. Their eyes were looking forward, searching the buildings. They did not think to look down. Why would they? No civilized species hid in the dirt like an animal. 3 blocks away, Sergeant Lisa Marsh pressed a button on her communicator. The explosion was massive. A building that the Valkyrie scouts had marked as empty erupted in fire and metal. 30 warriors were killed instantly. Dozens more were thrown to the ground by the force of the blast. Then the shooting started. Kevin burst out of the drainage grate, fired 3 shots at the nearest group of Valkyrie, and dropped back down before they could turn around. His heart was pounding so hard, he thought it might break his ribs. All across the city, the same thing was happening. Humans appeared from nowhere, fired their weapons, and vanished again. They came out of walls that looked solid. They dropped from rooftops that seemed empty. They rose from holes in the ground that the Velthari had walked over a dozen times without noticing. Commander Vorak stood in the middle of the chaos, trying to understand what was happening. His soldiers were dying all around him, but he could not see the enemy. Every time one of his warriors fired at a human, the human was already gone. "Form defensive positions," he shouted. "Back to back. Cover all directions." But the humans did not attack in groups. They came one at a time from different angles, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. It was like fighting smoke. Sergeant Lisa Marsh moved through the city like a ghost. She had spent 3 days studying the streets, learning every alley and hiding spot. She knew where the shadows fell at different times of day. She knew which doors were unlocked and which walls were thin enough to hear through. She found a group of 5 Velthari soldiers who had taken cover behind an overturned vehicle. They were watching the street in front of them, waiting for an attack that would never come from that direction. Lisa climbed up the back of a nearby building using a fire escape ladder. She moved slowly, placing each foot carefully to avoid making noise. When she reached the roof, she crawled to the edge and looked down at the aliens below. 5 targets. 5 bullets. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Her hands were steady now. This was what she had trained for. The first Velthari fell before the others even knew they were being attacked. The second and third went down before anyone could react. The fourth managed to look up and see her, but by then her bullet was already flying. The fifth tried to run. He did not get far. Lisa slid back from the roof edge and disappeared into the building. By the time more Velthari arrived to investigate, she was 3 blocks away, setting up her next position. When night fell, the fighting finally stopped. The humans melted away into the darkness, leaving the Velthari to count their dead. Commander Vorak looked at the numbers and felt something he had never felt before. 400 of his warriors were dead. 400 of the finest soldiers in the galaxy, killed by farmers and builders who were supposed to be weak. The Velthari had killed 11 humans. Vorak sent a message to the High Council. His hands trembled as he wrote the words. "Request immediate reinforcements." The humans do not fight like any species we have encountered. They do not follow the rules of war. They hide like animals and strike without warning. We need more soldiers. Many more. On the other side of the city, Captain Danny Holt gathered his officers in a new location. They had moved the command center 3 times during the battle, never staying in one place long enough for the enemy to find them. "Report," he said. Lieutenant Pete Crawford looked at his datapad. "We lost 11 people today. The Velthari lost around 400. Danny nodded. It was a good start, but he knew it would not last. The Velthari would learn. They would adapt. And they would send more soldiers. "Tell everyone to rest while they can," Danny said. This was just the first day. The real fight has not even begun. Maria Santos walked up to him after the others left. "Sir, do you really think we can win this?" Danny looked out the window at the dark city. Somewhere out there, his people were hiding, waiting, preparing for tomorrow. "I do not know," he said honestly. "But I know we are not going to make it easy for them."